So we are going to get started, and our first speaker is Kristin Kirkpatrick, and I'm going to read all of Kristin's accolades. She's a well-known contributor to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Time Magazine, Runner's World, Woman's Health. It goes on and on. She's a contributor to the Today Show and also to Dr. Oz. But what Kristin's going to talk to us about in a few minutes is about how eating is, well, mandatory. It's something we have to do. And it's about the choices that we make that can make us healthier and happier. So with that, Kristin, come on down.
Woo, hello everyone. I know the first question is, why the song? Why did I choose Boy George, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? And it's because when we talk about losing weight and diet, sometimes we cry. So that is the reason why I chose that song. So I'm so honored to be back on this stage today. This is my second year that I've been at this conference, and it's just incredible. And I'm so excited to be here. So last year, I kind of went through some of the basics. Things like don't have too much sugar and make sure you're not having white refined grains, things of that nature. So this year, what I really wanted to do was kind of take it up a notch and tell you a few tips on how you can actually, what I call, upgrade your diet. My assumption is that everyone in the audience that was here last year made every single solitary change I suggested. So if that assumption is correct, then this will be the upgrade of what we suggested last year. All right, so starting off with optimizing your health, this is the conference, and then optimizing your diet and losing those last 10 pounds. So when we think about our diet, we are not dogs, and we have a very specific plan on how we're supposed to eat to be able to prevent chronic disease, to be able to keep our weight in check, things of that nature. And what I did last year to start, I'm going to start with again this year. So whether you were here last year and you forgot or you're new this year, I always start with what the definition of food is from Michael Pollan. Has anyone read any of his books, The Omnivore's Dilemma and Defense of Food? He's amazing. And so of all the things that we look at in diet, and there's a new diet, I feel like, every day, right? One diet will tell you do this, another diet tells you do this. And it actually becomes very confusing. So I like to simplify it at the start and tell people that first and foremost, you need to eat food. So food is defined as something that comes from nature, was fed from nature, and will eventually rot. 90% of your diet needs to be food. So think about what you had last night for dinner, or think about what you might have for breakfast every morning, and ask yourself if it was actually food. Now, of course, we have some really obvious examples of what's food versus what is not food. So here I have food-like products. None of these things are going to rot. So Halloween is coming up. All of the things in your child's bucket will not be food. That's okay for one night in moderation, and then maybe the next day get rid of it. But everything on the left side is going to be food. We also want to eat with a purpose. So I think we've had this misnotion that a calorie is a calorie for way too long. And a calorie is not a calorie. Different calories are metabolized differently in our body, and they really do impact how easy it is for us to lose weight, to manage our health, things of that nature. We also have hormones. So the majority of my patients, and this is why this slide is up, are usually premenopausal or postmenopausal women who have come to me with, okay, I turned 50 and all of a sudden I have like a belly, and I never had a belly before, or I can't lose weight. This is probably 65% of my practice. And so I always look at kind of what are the differences once you become postmenopausal. What are some of the things you have to look at? What are some of the things you have to do to, in fact, upgrade that diet? All right, so let's talk first about kind of the last 10 pounds, but really this is true whether you need to lose weight or not have to lose weight. The first is eating to exercise. Okay, this is a problem I see with a lot of my clients. And I know in some ways it sounds ridiculous, but I have had probably at least 20 patients come to me this year because they started doing CrossFit and they gained weight. And I'm not talking muscle. They didn't necessarily gain muscle. Now, that's not everyone, and that's not to bash CrossFit in any way. But what I've seen in some of these patients is they would do CrossFit, or you plan for a marathon, or whatever it may be, and you completely overestimate how many calories you actually burned. And then you go overboard. and you eat more than you actually need in terms of fuel. So that's the first thing. The other place where I've noticed people are kind of, and again, I'm not saying don't exercise. I'm definitely not making that comment. What I'm saying is you can't give yourself, especially postmenopausally, the amount of calories you think it takes to perform a task, and then eat to compensate for that. Exercise also makes you hungry too, so a lot of times we can overeat after workout, things of that nature. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm on the advisory board for Lose It. That's an app. So you may have heard of MyFitnessPal, you may have heard of Lose It. And what I've noticed is that if I tell individuals to stop tracking their exercise on the app, a lot of times they will actually start losing weight. So I don't know if anyone here uses those apps to lose weight, okay? Sometimes it gives you more calories in terms of your bank than you're actually burning, all right? So that's kind of one tip, is to like not stop exercising, but think about exercise in terms of, okay, did I really just burn 1,200 calories like the elliptical told me to? And am I compensating later by saying, well, I burned 1,200 calories, so yeah, I can have 3 glasses of wine and this entire roast, right? And you might not be able to, right? You might not be able to. So that's one thing. So just something to think about. The other thing is starting your day off with sugar. So this is a huge, 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 huge problem that I have. So I don't know if anyone saw the New York Times article from about probably a month ago that talked about how the sugar industry shifted the blame onto fats. It actually quoted physicians that are now deceased from the 1960s that were told by the sugar industry, don't tell people that sugar could cause heart disease or could give you high cholesterol or is inflammatory. Let's blame it on fat. This was an actual New York Times article, and it was fascinating. So in a lot of ways, the patients that come to me, they feel that, well, as long as I'm eating pretty healthy and I have a little sugar in the morning, that's okay. It's not going to be a huge deal. And when you look at studies, when you look at how important it is to have protein for breakfast, about 20 grams or more, and how that impacts cravings, hunger, things of that nature, it actually is a really, really big deal. So here's what starting the day off with sugar looks like. There are the obvious culprits, right? So obviously you're sitting there thinking, well, of course, I know not to have a donut for breakfast. Everyone knows that, but you might not give the same kind of attitude to a Luna bar, right? You might not look at that. So if you remember last year when we talked about wanting to kind of control your sugar, what we really focused on was looking at the grams of sugar, multiplying that by 4, and not going over 100 calories every day of added sugar. Okay, so why don't you want sugar for breakfast? Number one, it's probably the worst time during the day to look at increasing insulin, blood sugar, things like that, in terms of how your cravings are going to be associated the rest of the day, how your hunger is going to be associated. So again, a bagel, I remember back in the 80s when we were all big on fat-free, bagels were like the best thing in the world because there was no fat. And then we as a nation became more fat. So that was really faulty thinking, but that's what we thought. We thought we couldn't have fat. And then you might be confused, why am I showing you this super healthy bowl of oatmeal? I'm showing it to you because this bowl of oatmeal also has berries on it and bananas, and there's not 1 ounce of protein in that bowl of oatmeal. It's too many carbohydrates. So yes, we're talking sugar, but we're also talking about getting massive amounts of carbohydrates in your diet as well. And again, for a lot of my patients, lowering their carbs seems to be one of the things that's really helpful with being able to lose weight. Here's some options of what you could do. You could obviously do a protein shake. For some people, they'll be like, no way, I don't want to drink my breakfast. I want to eat my breakfast. You can also add things like having eggs. Again, we've had all this research saying that no, eggs do not increase cholesterol the way we had thought that they increased cholesterol. If you look at the Nurses' Health Study, we know that it doesn't have the impact like we used to think. And it's a great source of protein. And then we go back to that definition of food, right? So how did the hens eat? Are they really feeding from nature, or are they not feeding from nature? So you can see how when we look at a food product, we kind of can put that definition in to see if it fits. Nut butters are another great example of how you can get protein. The reason I talked about fat is because, again, we have had this fear of fat. But when you think about weight loss, when you think about controlling insulin and blood sugar, okay, insulin's a fat-storing hormone. Okay, so fat and protein don't impact insulin and blood sugar, which is why I'm making all these suggestions for breakfast. And we've seen studies that actually look at it. You can also kind of upgrade to some smart carbs. So you could have a piece of toast with avocado. And again, I'm going to give you some examples of this in a few slides. But if you have toast that's sprouted and that can be flourless, then a lot of times the carbs are less, the protein goes up. This is where we get into upgrading some of our foods. You can have wraps that have absolutely no grain at all. So you can have an almond wrap, or you could have a coconut wrap. That would be another example. You can add protein powder to the oatmeal or hemp seed to the oatmeal. Again, not to say that oatmeal is not a great option and not healthy, but what you want to do is add some protein in it. I always talk to people about giving carbohydrate and sugar competition for digestion, right? So when you think about sugar or a white carbohydrate going into your body with nothing else standing in its way, your blood sugar and your insulin are really hugely impacted, really hugely impacted. So when you add in protein or you add in fats, you have now completed a competition for that sugar. So now your body's like, okay, the sugar was really easy. Now I got to deal with this fat. That's really hard. Fat's hard to digest. And then your blood sugar and your insulin are not as greatly impacted because of it. The next reason is that you've neglected to upgrade your carb choices. So again, this goes on the assumption that no one here is eating white pasta. Maybe you're eating 100% whole wheat pasta, which is a great option. It's a great option. But I've got some better options if you want to lose weight, if you want more protein, and quite frankly, if you want more nutrient density in your diet. So the examples I have here, if we can look at some of the numbers. We do have a laser here, do we? Yeah, here we go. Okay. So we've got 100% whole wheat pasta here, 35 grams of carb, 6 grams of fiber. So when I talk to my patients, I give them a prescription of what we call digestible carbohydrates, okay? Fiber is not digested at all. At all. Your body cannot digest fiber. So a digestible carbohydrate is taking the carbs and subtracting the fiber. That whatever is left over is what you actually digest, okay? If you think of your carb intake like in that manner and you say to yourself, okay, I'm only going to have 50 digestible carbohydrates a day, it forces you to make really good choices on which ones you're going to actually put in your body, okay? So we've got this pasta, and then next to it, and then protein is 7 grams. Next to it, I've got a black bean pasta. Has anyone tried any of the bean-based pastas? Okay, so I've got a black bean pasta. There's 17 carbs. There's 12 grams of fiber. So you can see the difference in how many you're digesting, and 25 grams of protein. This is a great example of upgrading carbohydrates. The whole wheat pasta is great. The bean-based pasta might be a little bit better. Okay? That's one example. Here's another example. Triscuits. So I'm not talking about a Ritz cracker, which I bashed last year. Ritz crackers are poison, okay? So it's not the Ritz cracker. Now we're into Triscuits. Okay, now I got a whole wheat cracker and it's got fiber and I'm feeling great about myself. Okay, so again, if we look at this, we've got 20 grams of carbohydrate, 3 grams of fiber, and thankfully no grams of sugar in a Triscuit, which is great. Different from a wheat thin. So just in case you're debating between the wheat thins and the Triscuits of the world, wheat thins have sugar. That's why they taste so great. The second example is a brand. It used to be called Two Moms in the Raw. They just changed their marketing, and now it's called Soul Sprout. So 8 carbohydrates and 6 grams of fiber. So there's 2 digestible carbohydrates here. So this is what I'm talking when I talk about upgrading your carbs. Less than 1 gram of sugar. And again, it's just sprouted and it's almonds. And so again, you're not getting grains in it. That helps to bring that down. All right, here's another example. I talked a little bit about sprouted breads. So we have a whole wheat English muffin. This is one example. And then this is a great bread from Trader Joe's, the sprouted flourless whole wheat berry bread. And so if you look at the protein right here, we've got 5 grams, about 15 grams of carb, and a good amount of fiber as well. So again, a great example if you're thinking to yourself, okay, I want to upgrade my diet, I want to get more nutrient density, I want to lose weight. This is one of the ways to do it, is to try and upgrade those carbs and get some of those other ideas into your diet. All right. Fourth is that you're too hungry to lose weight. So I have plenty of people, and if anyone's sitting out there thinking I've tried 10 diets in the span of my lifetime, and one of them involved just not eating, right? I just thought, well, food's not working for me, so I should stop having food, right? So again, when we get into this kind of starvation mode, we always can go back to what would happen if we were cavemen and if we were in the forest. So genetically, we are pretty much the same, right? So from that perspective, you absolutely have to eat, but if you upgrade your diet to some of these options, you should not be as hungry and have as many cravings. The problem with some things like the Weight Watchers or some of the shake systems of the world, even though they've improved, is that they don't teach you how to eat. They just teach you how to limit your calories. And they don't necessarily keep you satisfied. They keep you hungry. And so you're likely to get off of it, okay? Which is why we try 10 million things that don't work. So these are things that make you hungry. White grains, things that are really concentrated sugar. So again, some of these things you'll look at and be like, well, that's healthy, right? I can't tell you how many patients come to me and I'll say, okay, I'm doing a food diary. Tell me how much sugar you have in your diet. I don't eat any sugar. I'm really good. I have a tablespoon of honey in my oatmeal in the morning. Honey is a sugar. So even though there's a lot of great feelings surrounded by honey, and I am so for helping the bees, it still is going to increase your blood sugar and your insulin. And again, go back to that theory that we were talking about, how insulin does want to store fats, and you don't want to have too much insulin circulating around. You definitely don't want it if you have any kind of less resistance to insulin, where insulin's not doing its job to take sugar into the cells. Juices, another worthless food. You should never drink a fruit. There was just a lawsuit against Naked Juices, and again, not to bash Naked Juices, but I always look at their bottle and it's like 5 blueberries, 2 apples, 3 raspberries. And I get it, it's more convenience, but why can't you just eat the foods? Just have the 5 blueberries and have those mixed vegetables. You'll get more fiber. Okay, so things of that nature you have to look for as well. These are things that make you full. So again, I think, a lot of people are probably sitting here saying, I can't believe this, you're a dietitian from the Cleveland Clinic and you're showing me a stick of butter. Like, you gotta be kidding me. But we do know that fat keeps you full. So not to say that you can sit around if you wanna lose weight or improve your diet and eat sticks of butter every day. But when you look at, physiologically speaking, what keeps us full, what keeps us satisfied, fat does it. Fat delays gastric emptying. Okay, it means that it takes a long time for fat to get out of our system. That's why they tell you don't have a high-fat meal before you go to bed. Okay, that keeps you full. So having nuts as a snack instead of an energy bar, beans, legumes, right? Tons and tons of protein, lean sources of protein, all of those things would be beneficial. All right, I always have to put one cartoon in, and I saw this, and I thought of my 3-year-old who, of course, by karma, hates broccoli. So I love this little cartoon. But this is another great example. So again, we're eating healthy, we're having more fruits and vegetables, but maybe you're having too many fruits, and maybe all of your vegetables are starchy. So again, our conversation today is about upgrading. Still getting things that are very nutrient dense, that are very healthy for us, that are very satisfying, but maybe getting better options of them. So here we can look at what's called the glycemic index. People usually have heard of the glycemic index, understand what it is. What I think about when I think about glycemic index is giving your body things that are very difficult to digest. Okay? Our conversation has centered around that in the past 15 minutes. So fiber, protein, fat, things of that nature. So you could have something like a banana, which is easy to digest, very high in the glycemic index, or you could have apples and pears, very difficult, more difficult, let's say, to digest because they're lower in the glycemic index. They have more fiber, right? You ignore your stress. That's another big one. I I won't go into a lot of detail about this because we have so many mindful experts today, and mindfulness is not my expertise. But we do know that having perpetually high levels of cortisol do contribute to weight gain. So if you can't manage stress, if there's some way you can't do that, then you are more prone to weight gain without a doubt. We also know that if you're burning the candle at both ends, so you're not getting enough sleep, our digestive hormones are kind of flip-flopped. So we have two that come in to tell us when to eat and when to stop eating. Ghrelin comes in and says, hey, and it's secreted, right? The brain gives a response and it's secreted, and it tells you you're hungry, you need to add some fuel to the cells, you need to eat. And then when you have fueled yourself, leptin gets secreted and tells you you can stop eating. Now, we usually go well beyond that response from leptin. We do. So like one of the things I said last year, one of the tricks was to eat until you're no longer hungry, not till you're full. If you eat till you're full, you've gone well beyond when leptin has told you to stop, okay? And we know that a lack of sleep can really screw these two digestive hormones up. So ghrelin stays on all day, and leptin never turns on, okay? So you wake up, you pulled an all-nighter, and the next day, and if, put your hand up if this has ever happened to you, and it's definitely happened to me, you're just like, all I want is like pizza all day long, I'm not satisfied, I want to keep eating. And it's because you haven't gotten sleep, and that ghrelin is just constantly being pumped in, right? Eat, and leptin's not telling you to stop. Okay, you're way too happy at happy hour. I have a patient, this is actually true, yes, there's benefits to alcohol, but I have this patient who came to see me, and she had 2 martinis every evening. Her diet was otherwise healthy, and she exercised. And so she and I are meeting, and she's like, I've done everything, there's nothing else I can do. I am lost, what do I do? And I said, let's just do an experiment. Let's cut the martinis out for like 6 weeks and see what happens, and make no other changes. And just from that, she lost weight. Just from cutting out the martinis. So alcohol adds in empty calories, right? It really does. So and I'm not sitting here telling you, well, here's what I got from Kristin's presentation. Don't exercise and don't drink. She is fun, right? I hope they don't invite her back next year. And I'm not saying that. I definitely exercise, and you can definitely have a glass of wine here and there. But if you are sitting here in the audience thinking, okay, I cannot lose the weight, I'm really struggling, alcohol might be one of the reasons, and it might be one of the things you should cut a little bit more. You're lacking liquids. So this is a quick one I'll cover. Basically, when you are dehydrated, a lot of times the body confuses that with hunger. So that's why I'm showing you this. So when you're dehydrated and you have that confusion, you will eat. If you stay hydrated, if you have liquids, not only will your belly literally be full, right, and that helps, like having a glass of water before dinner, that kind of thing, but you also won't confuse that wanting to eat as well. You're overeating healthy foods. This is a big one, okay? Does anyone know what a serving of hummus is? It's 2 tablespoons. Okay? Like, when's the last time you were at a party and like 1 chip could be a tablespoon? And then the second and the third and the fourth. So again, a calorie is not a calorie, but even with healthy calories, you can overdo it. And then if you're confused as to whether something's a healthy product, like, well, I had a bag of granola for breakfast, which is not necessarily healthy, that also can contribute to weight gain and not being able to lose weight either. All right, my last one is probably my favorite, so I'll spend the last few minutes on this. You know your gene size, but you don't know your genes. So what the heck am I talking about here? So one of the things we do at Cleveland Clinic is something called nutrigenomics. So nutrigenomics looks at the synergy between your genes and your food preferences. It's not really a new area in dietetics because nutrigenomics has been around for a long time, but the testing of it is fairly new. So we have patients that we test, and we can determine based on what they are doing whether or not they would do better losing weight on a higher protein diet or a diet that's low in saturated fat. We can tell that from a genetic standpoint. It's really fascinating. So the test that we do looks at 45 genes. It's saliva, and it gives you a lot more information other than just weight loss. But it's one of the big things that when I've been doing these consults with people, that actually has helped them with weight loss as well. So again, we won't spend too much time on this. I think I'm out of time to begin with, but we know that emotional thoughts, stress, things like that do impact gene activity. And I'm going to skip this because I am going to run out of time, and I've warned that I might. All right, let me go to my last slide. So this is just one quick example. So this is a report that we have for people. This is an actual patient. And you can see on this one that this person, based on her genetic profile and the gene and the marker that we looked at in this specific test, she was recommended to have her calories be 25 to 35% of energy from protein if she wanted to be successful at weight loss. So this is really interesting stuff that we talk a lot about. Okay. Too many slides on nutrigenomics, but that's all right. I'm going to end on time. All right. Okay. So what I really wanted to connect with today is really looking at the upgrading of your carbs in general, looking at improving your breakfast, all of those things that we know factor into a healthy diet, but also factor into being able to lose weight. So if you are sitting there and you're thinking, okay, I need to lose weight, I'm really struggling, I don't know what to do, or I just want nutrient density, all of these things can hopefully go in to help you make some better decisions. So hopefully I ended right on time. Thank you for your time today and allowing me to be here.